from NHCSR here. I'm going to start sticking these field reports into the Serious Grower feed during the growing season to give you some real-time reports from our extension specialists in New England, New York, and the Mid-Atlantic states. Look to links for resources from extension educators in your region and pay close attention to where some of these reports are coming from because we're covering a wide region. Reach out if you need help connecting with your local extension specialist. Wherever you are, we will get you hooked up with the right expert in your area. Right. Top line reports for August 5th, 2026. Plant diseases are ticking up this time of year. Cercospora leaf spot is commonly reported in beets and chard. That's the small circular spots with the gray or tan centers and the dark reddish purple borders, really a hallmark of local beets. We are still hearing reports of funky garlic and onions where some diseases may be acting to rot scapes, funky growth on the stems. That kind of thing might even encourage flies to join the party. We are hearing it's been a particularly bad year for southern blight in the mid-Atlantic states. Southern blight is a destructive soil-borne fungal disease in tomato. You might see stem cankers. These are sunken brown to black lesions that appear in the lower stem right at the soil line that can girdle and kill that plant. As disease symptoms progress, you might notice some fungal growth, some thick fan-like white mold or mycelium that spreads across the base of the stem nearby soil during moist weather. Down the road, you might notice sclerotia formation, and that's the stage that stays in the soil for a very long period of time. These are small, round survival structures. They're about 1/16 of an inch wide. They'll form in that fungus, changing from white to tan and finally dark reddish brown, resembling a mustard seed. So that might ring some bells. You'll notice fruit rots, so low-hanging tomato fruit touching the soil will develop these soft, watery, sunken spots and collapse within a few days. The entire plant experiences a rapid permanent wilt, while the leaves often stay green before turning brown. So if any of this sounds familiar to you, take a look in the show notes. I have put a link to a resource with some photographs. For areas affected by leek moth in northern New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, the third flight of leek moth adults is continuing, and pupa have been observed in New York onion crops. Folks who are harvesting garlic and storage onions this time of year in those areas affected by leek moth are encouraged to top those crops before putting them up. So cutting off leaves before putting up the bulbs into storage. We know that these leek moth larvae are known to continue their way down those onion leaves towards the bulb, where they can infect the bulb and cause all sorts of problems. Research conducted at the University of Vermont investigated the influence of cutting bulbing onions down to 1 inch, 6 inches, and 10 inches. They found that all these lengths work to remove the leek moth infestation, but they recommended that bulbs cut down to 10-inch lengths in the handful of studies that they did, provided the best quality onions compared to the shorter cut. Corn earworm pressure is growing as expected, and we are still hearing reports of fall armyworm damage in corn in many areas, typically without much indication from adult monitoring data. So all the more reason to scout that corn. We're also happy to report that the 2026 Cornell IPM Organic Production Guide is available. They have been putting out this guide for several years now. The 2026 version is available online. Find a link in the show notes. Please check it out. This is awesome. Not only is this guide a product of an army of experts at Cornell, they do a very interesting thing when presenting evidence on pesticide efficacy. Oh, I love it. There's not too much data on products registered for use in organic systems, and results can vary wildly in biologically diverse agroecosystems, especially if you're using biopesticides. What they do is present efficacy as the average percent improvement in treated plots compared with untreated controls. And what I mean by this is that they will report how many studies have been conducted and how many reported positive results. That way you know how much work was actually done to evaluate the effectiveness, or if the rating was just like a wild guess on how well that product worked. And it also gives you kind of a sense of how hit or miss the approach is. This tends to be the name of the game when it comes to products that are approved for use in organic systems. Sometimes they can work really, really well. Sometimes they don't work at all, and usually there's some kind of biological way to explain that, but the way that they present efficacy will give you a sense of how tried and true that approach is. Check it out. All right, so we're coming in the part of the year where we're seeing signs of below ground pests. It would obviously be too late to do anything by the time you see chewing damage from white grubs or wireworm on root crops. It would be a little too late to do anything if you find out you have a root knot nematode problem in any of the crops that are affected by plant parasitic nematodes. But it might be a good time of year to talk about a game plan for next year, what to do next year. So crop rotation has its limitations with arthropods. They move around. They're kind of hard to predict. It's not the same as if you have a soil that's impacted by soil-borne fungi or soil-borne bacteria, because pathogens tend to have a very close relationship with their host plants. Rotating out of a crop for a few years can help in driving down that soil-borne disease inoculum. That's not necessarily the case with a lot of these insects. They're harder to predict. They move around a little bit. In the same sense, solarization might be effective in killing soil pathogens, because you're killing everything in that top 2 to 4 inches of soil using heat. Again, insects can move and then move back in, so that can be a problem. However, it sounds like it might be a possibility for some of these plant parasitic nematodes, something to think about. Biofumigation is often talked about growing high isothiocyanate producing mustards, so growing mustard gas. It's really hit or miss, and I think a lot of the projects that have looked at it have said it's easy to do wrong, getting the right soil moisture, getting the right gas production, trapping that gas in the soil for long enough to make it effective. I think even in situations where they've proven that it can solve some problems, a lot of people go, man, it was too much work to make it worthwhile. One take home there is just growing a mustard crop is not going to help you. It's really incorporating that, producing the gas, and doing a biofumigation process. And oftentimes tarps are necessary. So I'm including a couple of resources there, but just, buyer beware if you're going to consider using a mustard cover crop for any kind of remediation. There are a few chemical options for managing soil-borne pests, but they typically are not curative. They're usually not reducing the population in the soil. They are usually protecting plants from insect feeding damage down the road. So, for example, we've been talking a lot about biopesticidal products containing Burkholderia rhinogensis. These products, something like Magistine, Venerate, they have shown pretty good efficacy in a few different scenarios. So, for example, the product Magistine contains a heat-killed strain of this Burkholderia, and it's approved for use in organic systems. The same makers of Magistine have recently come out with a few different products that are not approved for organic systems because they are using a chemically killed strain of Burkholderia, but those products have the same benefits of 0-day pre-harvest interval, all sorts of other benefits of using a microbial product. Because these products are heat killed or chemically killed, they do not rely on live bacteria colonizing the soil. Instead, they deliver active secondary metabolites that act directly on the pest as a stomach poison. They're rated pretty well for plant parasitic nematodes. They will act to paralyze nematodes within 24 hours and cause mortality within 48 to 72 hours, which is very typical of a stomach poison. There's also some indication that these products will inhibit egg hatching and juvenile molting in treated soils. Even in situations where these products are not killing the pest organism, system. That might be the case when you're talking about wireworm or white grub. There is a deterrent effect that keeps pests like white grubs and wireworms from causing crop injury. So they're less likely to take a bite out of that root crop, out of that carrot or potato or whatever. So that's why they are rated moderately effective for suppressive efficacy in those scenarios. These products are usually labeled for use in furrow, so you can apply them directly to the seed furrow. Many of these products are labeled for use in chemigation and drip irrigation, so you can put it through the drip or the trickle system. And then there are some soil drench applications. So you're drenching that whole bed, or you're maybe even mixing that product into the soil prior to bed formation. As far as costs, that Magistine product is coming to the market in a 2.5 gallon container, like $250 a jug, something like that. It's a pretty high rate on a per acre basis. So we're looking at like $80 to $160 per acre, and that's per application. For some of these, you're going to be applying them more than once throughout the season to keep those plants protected. I think that there are smaller containers of Venerate, and there's some Venerate products that are registered for use for these applications, these soil-borne applications, and you might be able to get a smaller container with a lower price point, but we're still kind of looking at like, $80, $100 an acre for using this and multiple applications. So there's certainly a price there, but pretty good efficacy. All right. That's it for today. Please let me know if you'd like to hear more about anything else. And thank you so much for listening.